A 3-year-old girl points at a police dog in the courtroom. A German shepherd utters 2 words. What happens next is unthinkable. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the downtown courthouse, casting long beams of golden light across the cold marble floor. Inside, Courtroom 7 was alive with activity. Attorneys in dark suits shuffled papers. Bailiffs whispered instructions, and a low murmur of the audience filled the air. It was meant to be a routine criminal hearing. Another case on the docket. Another witness to testify. No one anticipated anything unusual. Seated quietly on the wooden bench near the front was 3-year-old Emma Reynolds, her tiny hands clutching a soft plush bunny against her chest. Her brown curls were tied back with a faded pink ribbon, and her wide eyes darted around the expansive courtroom. She wore a yellow dress decorated with little sunflowers printed along the hem. Next to her sat her mother, Rachel, adjusting her blazer's collar and trying to appear composed. Rachel had been called as a witness in a case involving a string of warehouse robberies. 6 months earlier, she had seen something or someone through her kitchen window, a masked figure fleeing the scene. She couldn't identify the person, but her testimony about the direction and time of the escape remained important. With no one available to watch Emma that morning, the judge had reluctantly permitted the child to remain in the courtroom, provided she stayed quiet. At exactly 9:03 a.m., the side door swung open, and security officers entered, led by Officer David Cross, the K-9 handler assigned to courtroom duty that day. Following him was Rex, a black and tan German shepherd with sharp eyes and a commanding gait. Rex moved beside Officer Cross with military precision. His harness gleamed, and his posture was alert. The courtroom continued its proceedings without interruption as Judge Ellen Matters entered and called the court to order. As the opening remarks commenced, Emma shifted slightly, turning her gaze toward the officers. Her eyes locked onto Rex, and she stared completely still. Suddenly, without warning, Emma's small voice rang out across the silent courtroom. 2 words spoken with quiet clarity, but with the force of an earthquake. Bad man. Everything froze. The stenographer's fingers hovered over the keyboard. The prosecutor's head snapped around, and even the judge paused mid-sentence. All eyes converged on the child. Rachel gasped and bent down, whispering, "Emma, what did you say?" Panic crept into her voice. Undeterred, Emma slowly raised her arm and pointed, not at the dog, but at Officer Cross. Her lips trembled, but she repeated more clearly, "Bad man." The courtroom descended into stunned silence. Officer Cross froze, his usual firm and composed expression shifting almost imperceptibly, perhaps a flicker of fear, recognition, or guilt crossing his face. Before he could recover, he stood straighter. Judge Matters narrowed her eyes. "Is there a problem?" she asked. Rachel, flushing, tried to explain. "I'm so sorry. Your Honor, she must be confused. She's just a child." But Emma didn't look confused. She looked certain. She whispered again, eyes never leaving the officer's face. "He locked me." A collective intake of breath swept through the room. Outside, the wind picked up, bending the courthouse flag at the entrance. Inside, the storm was already brewing. In Judge Mathers' chambers, the tension was thick enough to taste. Officer Cross stood stiffly in front of her desk, arms folded, trying to maintain a practiced calm beneath his composed exterior. Beads of sweat formed along his hairline. The judge studied him intently before speaking. "You are visibly agitated." "Officer Cross," she said flatly. He responded, trying to sound offended. "With respect, Your Honor, I don't appreciate being pulled aside because of a child's outburst." He added, "She is 3 years old. That is hardly an admissible accusation." Judge Matters tapped her pen slowly against the wood. The child did not just say, "You are a bad man." She said, "You locked me." That is a serious statement. I will not ignore it. Outside the chambers, in a small witness waiting room, Rachel sat clutching Emma close in a vinyl chair. Her hands trembled. Emma had fallen quiet, but her face was pale, her eyes wide and fixed on the door. Rachel whispered mostly to herself. She remembers. Suddenly, Detective Elijah Monroe entered, summoned personally by the judge, a respected investigator with 25 years of experience in internal affairs. Monroe had a reputation for asking uncomfortable questions. He knelt beside Emma, keeping his voice gentle and low. "Hi, Emma. My name's Eli. Do you remember where you saw that man before today?" Emma hesitated, pressing her face into her mother's sweater. After a moment, she pulled back and nodded. In the dark place with the barking, tears welled in Rachel's eyes. "What dark place, baby?" Emma pointed downward, toward the floor. It smelled like metal. Monroe frowned. "Did he hurt you, sweetheart?" Emma shook her head, then said something even more chilling. "He hurt the dog." In that instant, Monroe's posture changed. He stood quickly, eyes locking onto Rachel. "You said your daughter had never seen Officer Cross before?" he asked. "Never," Rachel confirmed. "We moved here 6 months ago. The only time she was separated from me was last fall. She got lost during a block party. We found her in a utility shed near the old train depot. She had scratches." Monroe pressed for details. Rachel nodded. "We thought she fell. The shed was locked from the outside. The police said she must have wandered in and shut the door by accident." "Who was the responding officer?" Monroe asked. Rachel blinked. "I don't remember. It was late. There were so many lights and people." Monroe turned to the bailiff. "Give me the incident report from that day. I want the name of the officer who responded." As they left the waiting room, inside the courtroom, Rex lay quietly beside the witness stand, his chest rising and falling. Yet, something about his posture had changed. His ears were upright, his jaw clenched, and he stared at the closed door behind which his handler had disappeared. With a low, almost growling sound, he stood and positioned himself directly in front of Emma's chair, like a sentinel guarding something precious. The courtroom had yet to witness the worst, the child's memory. And now, the dogs. Detective Monroe returned to the courtroom floor, clutching a file with urgency in his stride. Approaching Judge Mather's bench, she leaned forward, noting the seriousness on his face. "It is confirmed," Monroe said, voice low but firm. "Officer Cross was the first responder to Emma's disappearance last October. He claimed to find her behind a locked shed near the abandoned rail yard. But here's the problem." Monroe handed her a photograph from the file, an external bolt lock on the shed. It was impossible for her to have locked herself in. And now, this, her unprompted identification of him in front of the entire court. The judge exhaled slowly. "We need to proceed carefully. But I want him held for questioning immediately. Quietly, no scene. No fuss. Get the department psychologist on standby. Eli, bring the dog." Meanwhile, in the hallway outside the courtroom, Officer Cross paced back and forth, his jaw clenched so tightly that his temples throbbed. He had survived worse than a child's imagination before. But something about this moment felt different, less controllable. The door opened, and 2 uniformed officers flanked Monroe as he stepped into the corridor. "Officer Cross," Monroe said, voice calm but clipped, "you are being placed on administrative hold pending an internal investigation." "You're joking," Cross snapped. "Over what? A toddler pointed her finger? A missing child? A false report? And a potential history of abuse involving your canine unit." Cross froze. "You can't be serious. That dog is clean." Monroe's eyes remained steady, though his expression was neutral. The dog remembered too. Cross's face twitched briefly, just a fraction. Monroe saw it. Inside the courtroom, Emma sat silently beside her mother, clutching a paper cup of apple juice with both hands. She didn't drink. Her gaze was fixed on the door. Then Rex entered. The German shepherd did not trot, but moved deliberately, his eyes locked onto Emma. Every camera in the room captured the moment. The bailiff hesitated, unsure whether to intervene. But Judge Matters gave a subtle nod. Let him go. Rex approached the bench and stopped just in front of Emma. He lowered his head, not in submission, but in recognition. He let out a low, barely audible whine. Emma looked up with wide eyes, then slowly reached out and touched his fur. That's him, she whispered. The barking dog. He was there. Rachel gasped. Emma, are you sure? She nodded firmly. He was the same dog. The room stilled. Monroe also paused, watching intently. Your Honor, he said, I respectfully request the court to authorize a formal review of Officer Cross's service history, including all deployments of his canine unit. I also request a medical exam for the animal. Granted. Judge Matters responded without hesitation. Have the department's veterinarian and trauma specialist review the dog within the hour. From the back of the courtroom, a young man in plain clothes rose. My name is Dr. Javier Benson. I'm a trauma behaviorist specializing in military and police dogs. I've been observing since the incident began. With your permission, I'd like to examine the dog now. The judge nodded, and Benson approached Rex. The dog showed no fear or hostility. But when Benson gently lifted one of Rex's hind legs to examine the skin, he inhaled sharply. Fresh scars, old burns, lash marks, consistent with tethering and forced punishment. Someone had hurt this dog who knew how to conceal it. Monroe turned to the judge. We will need warrants. I suspect Officer Cross is just the beginning. Judge Matters looked down at Emma, who was now quietly cradling Rex's head in her lap. The girl didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence had spoken volumes, as had Rex's unwavering loyalty. Detective Monroe stood before a whiteboard filled with printed files, sticky notes, photographs, and police logs. In the center, one name was underlined in red, Officer David Cross. What started as a single case was quickly unraveling into a much larger web, one that stretched back for years. There are 5 other children, Monroe said, turning to Assistant District Attorney Lorraine Shepard, all found near sites where Cross's patrol car logged GPS activity each time a child was recovered. Each report was vague. Lorraine nodded grimly. The psychological profiles match. Missing for hours. No clear trauma. No follow-up. And no suspicion, because he's a cop, outside the conference room. Rex lay curled by the window, eyes half closed, but when Monroe stepped into the hallway, the dog remained alert. Ever since being removed from Cross's control, Rex hadn't barked once. He stayed close to Monroe and Emma. Good boy, Monroe whispered, scratching behind the dog's ear. In the courthouse's pediatric wing, Emma sat quietly on a cushion, coloring with crayons while her mother watched the doorway nervously. Rachel, Monroe said softly, we need to ask Emma one more question. Her hand trembled slightly as she nodded. I'll stay beside her. Dr. Benson knelt at Emma's level, speaking gently. Emma, do you remember where you saw Rex before court today? Emma set her crayon down, her eyes flicking to her mother. Then Monroe, then Rex sitting nearby. She barked softly at the man, whispering. He heard me crying. Rachel blinked back tears. Was it the same man from the courtroom? Emma nodded. He told Rex to stop barking, then pushed him. And what did Rex do? Benson asked softly. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. He sat by the door. He wouldn't leave. That was the moment Monroe realized. The dog had stayed with her, even when she was captive, even when hurt. Back at the police station, Digital forensics had uncovered deleted footage from a patrol car dash cam. Fragments showed Cross exiting his cruiser in an alley near an abandoned warehouse, the same place where Emma had been found. "Give me a full warrant," Monroe ordered, pushing the evidence toward Lorraine. Everything: storage units, computers, files. That night, with a judge's emergency signature, law enforcement raided Cross's personal storage. What they found was damning: dozens of files with case numbers, photos of children, encrypted memory cards, and in the far corner, a rusted kennel cage with claw marks inside. Monroe's breath caught. "Rex, he was locked in here," he whispered. Inside the cage was a collar marked with Cross's badge number and a bloody training whip. That was all they needed. Back at the courthouse, Cross sat cuffed in an interrogation room, silent for hours. Then Monroe entered with Rex at his side. The officer flinched when he saw the dog. Monroe placed a photograph of Emma beside the cage photo on the table. Emma remembered. So did Rex, without a word. They told the truth. Cross looked at the images, then at Rex, who now faced his former handler, calm and unblinking. "I'll talk," Cross finally said, voice trembling. "But I want protection. I wasn't the only one. It goes higher, much higher. Outside, rain began to fall. Inside, justice started to rise. The sunlight streamed to the tall courthouse windows, illuminating the mahogany benches and the solemn faces of those present. Today's crowd was different. Reporters filling the aisles, victims' families holding hands on the far side. A row of officers sat in silence, off duty but watching, hoping for redemption from a profession that had betrayed its code. At the center of the courtroom, Sergeant David Cross, shackled, pleaded guilty to 6 counts of child endangerment, abuse of authority, and obstruction of justice. His admission unraveled a network of corruption reaching 2 senior detectives and a forensic technician who'd altered reports to protect him. But all eyes weren't on him. They were on the little girl near the witness stand, her feet dangling, her hand resting softly on Rex's back. The German shepherd, calm and steady, wore an official K9 therapy vest. He sat quietly, eyes forward. When Emma shifted or whimpered, his head turned instantly toward her. The prosecutor, Lorraine Shepherd, approached the bench with a gentle expression. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to make a final statement before sentencing." The judge nodded. Lorraine faced the gallery. "This courtroom has witnessed horrors, betrayal, manipulation, cruelty, but it has also seen something extraordinary. Truth not revealed by experts or evidence or cross-examinations, but by a 3-year-old girl who said 2 words." She turned to Emma. When Emma looked at Rex and said, "He stayed," she wasn't just pointing out a dog. She was pointing out loyalty, protection, and a witness of unbreakable bonds. The courtroom fell silent. Lorraine continued. Officer Cross used his badge to shield himself. But Rex, discarded by the system, chose to stand with a child. And in doing so, he saved her life. The judge wiped his glasses, visibly moved. "I asked the court to recognize not only the conviction, but also the need for lasting change. We cannot allow silence to protect the powerful. We must listen, especially when the voice is small or the bark is loud." A ripple of emotion swept through the room. Cross refused to lift his eyes. The judge nodded solemnly. "The court acknowledges the prosecutor's statement. Let the record reflect that the testimony of a child and the behavior of a service animal contributed directly to this conviction." Turning to Cross, the judge said gravely, "You weaponized trust. Your sentence is 40 years without parole." Soft gasps echoed as bailiffs took him away. Emma sat quietly, one hand buried in Rex's fur. Later, in the courthouse garden, reporters tried to surround the family. Laura and Emma, now under protection, were quietly led away. Monroe knelt beside Emma. "Do you want to say goodbye to Rex?" he asked. Emma frowned. "He's not leaving." Monroe looked at Laura, who nodded tearfully. "We talked, if the department approves. We want to adopt him." Monroe smiled warmly. He deserves to be with his hero. That evening, at a press conference, District Attorney Lorraine Shepard announced a new initiative, the Emma Rex program, a sweeping reform requiring third-party oversight of K-9 units, improved officer screening, and trauma-informed court protocols for minors nationwide. Images of Emma and Rex went viral. The photo of her pointing with those two words, "He stayed," symbolized justice, innocence, and resilience in their new home. Emma now slept with Rex curled beside her bed. Some nights, she whispered softly to him before falling asleep, "You stayed." She'd say, "So I will never be afraid again." And Rex, ever vigilant, would close his eyes, knowing his purpose had finally found a home. Sometimes, truth stands silently. Other times, it stands on four legs. Thank you for joining us on this unforgettable journey. Today, we saw how a child's pure heart and a loyal German shepherd uncovered a truth hidden deep within the walls of justice. Little Emma's voice and Rex's unwavering loyalty reminded us that courage comes in all sizes, and heroes don't always wear badges. Some have tiny hands, and some have four paws. If this story moved or inspired you, or gave you hope, please subscribe to Amazing Paw Stories. We bring you real, emotional, and heartwarming tales where animals change lives, sometimes even saving them. Tap the bell so you never miss a story that might touch your heart, because the world needs more stories like this. Stories where love, loyalty, and truth always win. From all of us at Amazing Paw Stories, thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one.